Hi there. In this video, I'll give you the chance to rearrange some equations. Now this follows on from two other videos that I've made. In the first one, I was rearranging equations which contain 3 or 4 terms either multiplied or divided. And in the second one, I was cross-multiplying in order to make the chosen term the subject of the equation. So let's have a look at the equations that we're rearranging today. And here they are. Now, this is the first one, which is Q is equal to I times T. That's charge is equal to current times time. Don't worry again if you don't know these equations. The skill here really is just to get you to rearrange them, which will be very, very, very useful. Now, what I would like you to do when I tell you to pause the video is to rearrange this equation in order to make, first of all, I the current subject of the equation, and second of all, to make T the subject of the equation. So, if you pause the video now. So, if we want to make I the subject of the equation, then of course it's being multiplied by T. So, in order to get I on its own, we need to do the opposite of multiplication. We need to divide this side by T, which means we need to divide the left-hand side by T as well. And of course that will give us, therefore, I is equal to Q divided by T. If we want to make T the subject of the equation, we can say that T, well, T is being multiplied by I, so again we need to divide this side by I. That means we need to divide this side, the left-hand side, by I as well. So that will give us T is equal to Q divided by I. Now remember, as I said in the last two videos, if you're not 100% happy with rearranging equations, then what you could do is you could write the equation itself exactly as you see in the relationship sheet, then substitute the values. Of course, at that stage, then you would need to rearrange in order to find the final answer, usually. So, whichever method you're happiest with. Now, let's look at the second equation. So this is P is equal to F over A. Now, what I would like you to do is to rearrange in order to make, first of all, F the subject of the equation, and second of all, make A the subject of the equation. So this is our equation here, and as I said, if you get rearranging to make F the subject and then A, so if you pause now and then start when you're ready. So first of all, if I wanted to make, let's say I wanted to make F the subject of the equation, then at the moment F is being divided by A, so I need to do the exact opposite of division. I need to multiply the right hand side by A to get F on its own. So that of course means I'll need to multiply the left hand side by A as well, and that will give me F is equal to P times A. Now if I wanted to make A the subject of the equation, the way I'm going to do it is I'm actually going to multiply both sides by A. So multiplying the right hand side by A will just give me F. Multiplying the left hand side by A will give me PA. So PA is equal to F. Now if I now want to have A as the subject of the equation, I'll move this over a little bit. Then of course what I'll need to do is, at the moment it's being multiplied by P, so I'll divide that side by P. I'll need to also divide the F by P, and that gives me, therefore, A is equal to F over P. Third equation looks like so. Now D is equal to V times T. Again, let's not worry in this video what these different terms actually mean. It's just the rearranging that we're interested in here. So obviously what I would like you to do is to rearrange to make, first of all, V the subject of the equation and then T the subject of the equation. So pause the video now. So to make V the subject of this equation, at the moment it's being multiplied by T, so we need to divide the right hand side by T. Of course we need to divide the left hand side by T as well, and that gives us V is equal to D divided by T. Second of all, if I want to make T the subject of the equation, then of course T is being multiplied by V. So to get rid of that, I need to divide this side by V, and I need to divide this side, the left hand side, by V as well. And of course that'll give me, therefore, T is equal to D divided by v. Next equation. This is from radioactivity, and it's A is equal to n over t. Let's see then. So A is equal to n over t. And what I would obviously like you to do in this one is to rearrange to make n the subject and make t the subject. So pause the video now. So to make n the subject, first of all, at the moment n is being divided by t, so I need to do the opposite of division. I need to multiply that right hand side by t to have just n on its own. And that of course means that I need to multiply the left hand side by t as well. So that gives me n is equal to a times t. To get t on its own, what I'll do is I'll multiply both sides by t, but of course I'll keep the t on the left hand side. I want to make that the subject of the equation after all. So if I multiply the right hand side by t, that gives me of course n on the right hand side. If I multiply the left hand side by t, that gives me a times t is equal to n. And therefore, if I want t on its own, I want to divide this side by a, because at the moment t is being multiplied by a. So therefore t, I've gotten this on its own of course by dividing the left hand side by a, because at the moment it's being multiplied. I'll need to of course divide the right hand side by a as well. So it gives me t is n over a. Next equation. Now the next equation has 4 different terms in it, and this is the one for gravitational potential energy. If I can actually select the equation, there we go, that's it now. So the next equation is EP is equal to mgh. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to rearrange, first of all, to make m the subject of the equation, then g, then h. So pause your video now. First of all, to get m as the subject of the equation, at the moment m is being multiplied by g and h. So I'll need to divide the right hand side by gh, which means of course I'll need to divide the left hand side by gh, which gives me m is ep over gh. Next one, to make g the subject of the equation, I've got g is equal to, at the moment g is being multiplied by mh, so I'll need to divide the left hand side by mh, giving me of course g is equal to ep over mh. And to get h the subject of the equation, h is equal to, well, h is being multiplied by mg, so in order to get it on its own as the subject, I need to divide this right hand side by mg, which means I need to divide the left hand side by mg. So that gives me ep over mg. Next equation is one of the gas laws, and we'll be using cross multiplication, which isn't always, when you're recording a video, very easy to see, at least not for me. So the equation is P1 over T1 is equal to P2 over T2, and I know there are 4 terms in this equation. What I'll ask you to do is just to rearrange, first of all, to make P1 the subject, and second of all, to make T1 the subject. Remember, if you're actually using this equation, well, you might not know the equation yet, but in this equation, temperatures T1 and T2 both have to be converted to Kelvin. That's very important. So as I said, rearrange to make P1 the subject and then make T1 the subject. And if you can pause the video right now. So to make P1 the subject, I'm going to multiply the top left times the bottom right. First of all, that's going to give me P1 times T2 is equal to, and then I'll multiply bottom left times top right, T1 times P2. Now, as I said, I want P1 to be the subject. So at the moment it's being multiplied by T2. So I'll divide this left hand side by T2, which means I need to divide this right hand side by T2. Now it gives me, therefore, P1, that actually should be a lowercase p, is equal to T1 P2 over T2. To make T1 the subject, I'm actually going to have to multiply the bottom left times the top right, because of course I want the T1 on the left hand side. So bottom left times top right gives me T1 times P2 is equal to, I'll now multiply top left times bottom right, and that gives me P1 times T2. Now, if I want, of course, T1 on its own, then at the moment it's being multiplied by P2. So I'll divide this side by P2, which means I need to divide this side by P2 as well. And that gives me, therefore, T1 is equal to P1 T2 over P2. Now these are difficult. These are very difficult in order to rearrange. Again, remember that you might want to just write the equation exactly as you see that in the relationship sheet. Then of course substitute in the values, remembering of course for this one temperatures are in Kelvin, and then at that stage rearrange. If you are of course rearranging at that stage, you're using the same skills that we are here. Now let's go up to the next one. The next one is H is equal to D times WR. So we'll write it down first. H is equal to D times WR. And of course I would like you to rearrange first of all to make D the subject, and then second of all to make WR the subject. And if you can pause now. So to get D as the subject, D is equal to, it's being multiplied by WR, so divide the right hand side by WR, divide the left hand side by WR, giving you D is equal to H over WR. Second of all, to make WR the subject of the equation, well, it's being multiplied by D, so we want to divide the right hand side by D, and then of course we'd want to divide this by D as well. So WR would be H divided by D. And our final equation is a division equation. Let's see, move this up a bit, and we have the equation D is equal to E divided by M. So if you can rearrange this one, first of all to make E the subject, that's actually energy. Second of all to make M, that's mass, the subject of the equation. If you pause it now, and then you can of course play once you're ready. So first of all, to make E the subject, E is being divided by M. So if we want E on its own, what we'll do is we'll make E the subject by multiplying this side by M to give you, of course, E on its own. Well, they need to multiply D by M as well. So we're multiplying this side by M to make E the subject. We need to multiply this side, of course, by M as well, and that will give us E is equal to D times M. To make M the subject, what I'll do is I'll again multiply both sides by M, but I'll actually keep the left hand side as the left hand side and the right hand side as the right hand side. I'll not switch it as I did before. I was switching sides here to make E the subject. So if I multiply the left hand side by M, I get dm, and if I multiply the right hand side by M, of course I'm getting E on its own, and therefore if I want to find M on its own, well at the moment M is being multiplied by D, so I want to divide this side by D, and then of course pick up the pen again, I want to of course divide this side by D as well, and that gives me M is equal to E over D. So there we have it. Those are the 8 different equations. Now of course in this video you've used a whole selection of different methods. So we've had some equations of course where terms are multiplied, some where they're divided. We were cross multiplying of course at this stage. We've had here's an equation with 4 different terms. If you weren't 100% happy with rearranging these equations, then maybe you want to just revisit those first 2 when I was showing you the method used.